What's up guys, welcome to AnimeKouhai. If you want to help me out, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel.
Oh, good. Keep releasing as much as you want from now on, okay? No holding back. Just never do it outside of here, okay?
Oh, I understand.
Did he? I wasn't sure, but I had to take him at his word. Discussing matters like this would be awkward, so Rimuru had Veldora go into human form for a moment as he explained the current situation to Beretta and Trainee. Rimuru wanted to get right to work, but before that, he needed to make one final check with Beretta.
Beretta, you swore to Guy that you'd serve Ramiris, correct? You still feel the same way now?
He gave me a surprised look. I wondered if, under the mask, his expression actually changed a bit.
Sir Rimuru, I apologize if this is rude, but as I stated before, I wish to serve both you and Lady Ramiris.
Yeah, I remember, but doesn't that go against what you promised Guy?
It does. I was alone at the time, and…
No, don't worry about it. Ramiris wound up here in town anyway, just like you wanted. She's gonna help run this labyrinth for a while, and I expect you'll be happy to help us out, right?
Of course.
Great, then serving her is pretty much the same as serving me anyway.
Rimuru had been thinking about this ever since he heard about that. The idea of having Beretta just switch his allegiances to Ramiris, if he wanted to. That's what Beretta promised Guy, likely the strongest of all demon lords, and Rimuru doesn't think Guy appreciated people who broke their promises to him.
If that is what you wish,
he briskly replied.
Then I will work under Lady Ramiris.
Wow, everything turned out the way he wanted, didn't it? Ah well, I wonder where he learned to scheme like that.
Understood. The answer, of course.
I didn't need to hear that. Raphael just doesn't let up, huh? Who does it think it is? Maybe Raphael's the real schemer here. It sounded a bit sulky about that, but I wasn't about to start caring.
Excellent. From now on, Beretta, you will work as Ramiris's servant.
And her servant I shall be, but I still remember the great debt I owe to you, Sir Rimuru. If you seek anything from me at any time, please, just say the word.
I will, thanks.
Rimuru then undid the master lock set in Beretta's core, handing the roll over to Ramiris. With that, Rimuru could only take credit for creating him from now on. Rimuru would get to give him orders again if something happened to Ramiris, but otherwise, Ramiris was his sole master. That came as a relief. Now Guy had nothing to whine at Rimuru about, and Rimuru could certainly trust Beretta to keep Ramiris safe. Besides, this labyrinth was proving useful in many more ways than Rimuru originally guessed. On the surface, it was advertising to get adventurers to visit town. Underneath, it helped Veldora let off steam, and generate the massive magicule counts needed to turn metal ore into magisteel ore as a byproduct of the process. The maze would be a great springboard for future research into the nature of magicules, and all in all, this was a much more vital asset for Tempest than Rimuru thought at first. Trainee protecting this asset alone made Rimuru nervous, so having Beretta around put his mind very much at ease. As for Ramiris herself, the new master of Beretta, well, this sudden event was making her weep tears of joy.
My little Beretta, now my full proper servant. Now I'm no longer all by my lonesome forever.
Lady Ramiris, you have me as well?
Oh, yes, I do, Trainee. We're turning into a really big family now.
She loved the concept, darting around and flying circles around Beretta. Trainee watched on with a warm smile. Being alone must have pained that demon lord for a long time. Her family was just 2 people, still, but it must have been big enough by her standards? The sight worried Rimuru. He could rely on Trainee well enough, but she spoiled Ramiris way too much. It'd be a tough job, Rimuru knew, but he wanted Beretta to be the one, sane person keeping this crew together. Beretta had his conniving side as well, but Rimuru was sure Beretta wouldn't let him down.
Beretta, don't worry about me as much. Take care of Ramiris. Protecting her is job 1 for you now.
Yes sir, I swear it on my life.
Rimuru will trust Beretta on that. He's trustworthy enough. Ramiris and Trainee alone might find it rough going, managing all the monsters they'll find in this maze. With Beretta around, all problems are solved. This was perfect. Veldora and Rimuru watched as Ramiris carried on with her little happy dance, silly, but charming in a way. With the master-servant relationship set in stone, Beretta was now immortal inside Ramiris's labyrinth, no resurrection bracelet necessary. The same was true of Trainee. Resurrection bracelets and return whistles were temporarily infused with Ramiris's skills, but as her servants, the two had no use for those items at all. They were free to revive themselves at any of the pre-positioned save points available, so they wouldn't be flung out of the labyrinth after every death. In addition, they could teleport, more or less, between any save point in the dungeon. In some ways, it felt like Ramiris's mazecraft was more beneficial to her servants than herself. I mean, being able to resurrect yourself as many times as you like. That's downright scary. She had only 2 people working for her now, but what if that number started going up? The labyrinth was going to be teeming with monsters shortly. If she had full control over them, they'd be a virtual army for Ramiris. There wouldn't be any calling her a pipsqueak then, not without serious consequences. And oh man, what if they had the immortal attribute, too? You just couldn't downplay this threat. Really, in terms of the defense it offered, Ramiris's skill couldn't be more superior. People just never worried about it because, you know, this was Ramiris we're talking about. No big problem, just a lovable, lonely, tiny pixie. I'm sure she'd never even think of commanding an unstoppable army of invincible monsters or anything. Probably. Now on to the next step, the labyrinth's internal structure. With 100 floors to fill, coming up with a maze for each one seemed daunting, but we'd just have to plug away at it, I suppose. It's not like the maze itself was the main challenge to visitors. The first floor of this labyrinth was basically a square, about 800 feet to a side, roughly the size of Tokyo Dome, although the dungeon as a whole gradually got smaller as you went on, forming a sort of inverse pyramid. With Veldora releasing his aura at the bottom, I wanted a structure that got the magicules distributed as efficiently as possible. We were free to adjust the size of any of the floors, however, so we could change anything that didn't work. It was really an anything-goes kind of thing, beyond the realm of all common sense. Better not think too carefully about it. Into this labyrinth, we could install the following traps. Poison arrows, venom-tipped missiles that fly in from out of nowhere. Poison swamps, vicious-looking and causes damage and status ailments if you fall in. Rotating floors, confuse your sense of direction. Mapping is key, people. Moving floors, running by themselves. Pretty scary. Bladed wires, strung at neck level along the path, neatly slicing off your head if you walk through without noticing. Lethal if paired with a moving floor. Pitfalls, causes falling damage and pangs of fear once you see what's waiting for you down there. Mimic chests, think you found a treasure? Sorry, it's me. Exploding chests, think you found a treasure? Kaboom. Magic rooms, hello, about time some prey stepped in. Closed rooms, start a fire inside one, and dark levels, it's common sense to bring a torch with you, right? If you didn't, I can sell you one at an exorbitant price. Low ceiling levels, you sure don't want to run into a monster when you're crawling on all fours. Levels with special ground effects, whoa, what's a volcano doing in this labyrinth, and so forth. Combine them, and you could implement pretty much anything imaginable.
Nice work, Ramiris. You can craft these kinds of traps with your skill?
Sure can. As long as it's within the labyrinth, I can set up nearly anything.
She was probably right. They were on the 100th floor right now, but the composition of gases in the air was little different from the surface. Everything she accomplished with this reminded Rimuru once again of the power of mazecraft.
By the way, what's this closed room thing? Does that count as a trap, really?
Rimuru gave her an evil grin.
Well, in the air, there's this gas called oxygen. People, and most living things really, breathe this to bring it inside their bodies, although sometimes you see exceptions like me or Veldora. If there's very little oxygen in the air, taking a single breath could asphyxiate you, and maybe even kill you instantly. So you gotta be careful in rooms like that. That's the golden rule.
Simply sealing off a room is not terribly dangerous, but if you start a campfire or something, you could drain all the oxygen from the space and even replace it with poisonous gases. Best not to leap right into any old room you find in labyrinths or hidden areas, you know? You need to analyze the atmosphere inside first, asking whether there's poison gas and measuring the oxygen content. That's adventuring 101 right there. If you can't do that, you're not gonna live for too long. This world runs off magic, so you ought to at least have wind-based magic to circulate the air around. Rimuru explained all this to Ramiris in the easiest terms he could think of, but she didn't really get it.
My, certainly sounds like a mean trap anyway. If it doesn't affect us, I suppose I don't have to worry about it. But you're scary sometimes, you know that? You've always given me that impression. But you're still a great guy to have around. I sure never would have come up with this.
Once she knew it couldn't hurt her, she was all smiles. Rimuru appreciated the compliment, although it embarrassed him a little. A fellow gamer back in his old world would be well used to traps like this. But this was real, not some theme park attraction. It put real lives on the line. Rimuru had no idea how many days it'd even take someone to conquer a dungeon like this. Was it possible in 2 or 3? Plus, if the walls and geography were constantly changing, you'd probably opt to storm multiple levels at once to reach the save point at every 10 floors. Someone like Rimuru, invincible to poisoning, no need to breathe or eat or sleep, could treat it like a foot race, but normal people couldn't. Even heroic champions needed to rest now and then. Rimuru had to admit, this labyrinth was starting to look pretty forbidding.
Hey, you think this dungeon might be a touch too difficult?
Really? I fail to see the problem.
Yeah, Rimuru, this is no big deal at all.
Ramiris and Veldora were just laughing it off. Maybe I'm fine after all, Rimuru said to himself as he switched his focus to maze design. Several days passed. Ramiris buzzed around, crafting all the traps we'd need, and Beretta and Trainee installed them for us. Veldora and I, meanwhile, brainstormed ideas for the mazes, coming up with several patterns and setting them up so we could easily change them in and out. Things were going smoothly, but once we began considering the ground effects we could add to floors, Ramiris brought up an issue.
Oh, no, I can't do that. I don't have the massive amounts of energy it'd take to keep it all going.
She quickly threw in the towel, and she had a point, admittedly. Basically, Rimuru was picturing floors where you'd potentially run into natural disasters, fires, floors covered in ice, howling winds. He guesses volcanoes were asking a bit too much. Rimuru was assuming they could do anything with magic without considering the practical issues.
Yeah, sorry, Ramiris.
Rimuru apologized, throwing in the towel.
I probably went too far.
Well, how about we find some fire or frost dragons, tame them, and bring them in here? I could even catch 'em for you.
This voice sounded familiar to Rimuru. It belonged to someone who shouldn't have been here. Rimuru turned around to find a pair of platinum pink pigtails framing a face staring right at him. It was Milim.
What are you doing here, Milim?
That's it for this video, guys. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shout out to Varun Parmar, Abhishek Dungdung, Ashley Lobo, Rimuru the True Demon Lord, Anshu Mishra, Abel Brilliant, Theo Von Beckford, Tashan Johnson, Kaneki Galias, Adrian Torres, Anime Music Compilations, Nivea Jane, Issei, Dev, The Devastator, and last but not the least, shout out to Amaral Tempest. I'll see you guys in the next video.